Tonight on Primetime Politics, a father's legacy.
He invariably had very good advice for me. He was a very good listener.
As Canadians continue to pay their respect to Brian Mulroney, we sit down with the former Prime Minister's eldest son to talk about his father's impact on this country and what Ben Mulroney will miss most about his dad. Also,
which will it be? Will he spike the hike, or will we have a carbon tax election?
Conservatives are pursuing a vote of non-confidence over pollution pricing as they continue their efforts to kill the carbon tax. But coming up, we'll hear from one group that says carbon pricing is good for the environment and the economy. Plus, sounding an alarm about Canada's dwindling prosperity. We'll speak to former Liberal Cabinet Minister Anne McLellan and former Conservative Cabinet Minister Lisa Raitt. This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. The body of the late Prime Minister Brian Mulroney left Ottawa this afternoon, transported to Montreal, where Mr. Mulroney will lie in repose starting tomorrow at St. Patrick's Basilica. But today, before the funeral cortege left the nation's capital, hundreds of more people turned out, paying their respects to the former Prime Minister, offering their condolences to the Mulroney family, who for a second day in a row stood for hours to receive all those who came out.
I am here to pay my respects to the former Prime Minister. My dad was, he worked for Flora McDonald, so we moved here. So I ended up in Ottawa because of Brian Mulroney. And I think he did a lot for this country, and I think he's set the bar that everybody should aspire to.
Honestly, I'm just here to pay respect to a great man. So a man who's done a lot to Canada, and I think a man to look up to.
Okay, sir. I'm here because my first job 38 years ago, I worked in the Prime Minister's office, and I managed to go to a lot of the Christmas parties with Mila and Brian, and he was very nice to me, and that's why I'm here too, to pay respects to him.
I liked him. Yeah, he was a gentleman, but he was a good brain. He did a lot for Canada. I loved what he did with free trade and how he helped with apartheid and everything else that he did do. I'm sorry to see this great loss, and I feel badly for Mila and her family.
Well, we are happy to have on the program right now the eldest son of the late Prime Minister, Ben Mulroney. Ben, thank you for being here.
Michael, thanks for having me.
You know, first and foremost, condolences. You know, for people who don't know, you and I know each other from a past life, so I've been thinking about you since the news came out. How are you doing right now?
The past couple of days have been invigorating, exciting, emotional, but all positive. You know, we've been standing in line with hundreds. I think yesterday close to 1,000 people came through, each of whom had their own reason for showing up. And you don't show up because you have a negative thing to say or a negative thing that you feel about somebody. You show up because you want to share something positive. So we ended yesterday on a high, and then today is my dad's birthday, his 85th birthday. And you know, we woke up to a poll that said that 83% of Canadians think he did a good job on behalf of Canada. So my brother Nick and I walked up to the casket first thing this morning to give him that news. We said, you got a birthday present from a pollster, which is not something he was used to when he was alive. And so we're choosing to enjoy this. This is a special thing that we're all going through. And the fact that Canadians want to share in it with us is a wonderful surprise that we're going to keep with us for a very long time.
You know, most families who lose a loved one, they are allowed to grieve in private, but here you are with your family leading this national mourning for your dad. And I was watching your mom and your sister, you and your brothers. You were standing there for hours yesterday. As much as you find it invigorating, does it complicate the grieving process right now?
I don't think so. I think, you know, there's certain things happen publicly, other things happen privately. We've spent a lot of time together, which I know would make my dad really happy. We are going to have private moments. Tonight when we get home, we're going to celebrate my dad's birthday together. I don't think it complicates it. It's just specific to us. And it's like a big chunk of our lives. A big chunk of our lives did play out in public. And I think, you know, so many people came by yesterday. Let me put it this way. So many people came by yesterday and said, thank you for sharing your father with us. And that was, I think, an apt thing to say, that he played a lot of roles. And the people who waited in line had every right to mourn him with us because of those multiple roles that he played. And so it doesn't complicate. I think it's the right way to do it, to do this in public with everyone for whom he mattered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you noted, thousands of people showed up yesterday. More people are showing up today. He will then lie in repose in Montreal before the state funeral on Saturday. I'm wondering, of the many people you've talked to, and we're talking about Canadians from all walks of life, we're talking about political leaders, dignitaries, when they came up to you and shared their stories about your dad, was there anything that surprised you, something that you didn't know about your father already?
There were a number of stories I heard that were lovely. The thing that struck me yesterday was when the dignitaries were walking by, they weren't all here with stock condolences. So many of them came with stories from their home countries about the impact that Dad or his policies had on them and their people. The High Commissioner or the Ambassador from Estonia came to say thank you for Dad's government's recognition of Estonia. And a number of the former Eastern Bloc countries said the same thing. The representative of the Philippines came to say thank you for Dad helping strengthen their democracy. We heard the representative of Barbados said thank you because Dad forgave the debt that allowed them to finish building their airport. So these are not abstract thank yous. These are thank yous rooted in concrete measures that help the people of those countries. And I was surprised that so many of them, and don't even get me started on South Africa, that was a whole other thing as well. So this was, these were people who had real thank yous to give to a real person for real things that he did that changed the lives of a lot of people.
What do you think your dad would have made of all this? You know, you grew up in 24 Sussex Drive. You know it was not always an easy time for your father to be in the public eye as he was, to be a leader as he was. What do you think it would mean for him to hear all these kind words and people, as you say, not giving stock sympathies, but really sharing stories of how your father touched their lives?
Well, you know, he always used to say that, you know, he governed for a better Canada in 30 years, not better headlines in 30 days. And we're 30 years removed. So now we see, you know, we can take stock. We say, is Canada better for the decisions that he made? He certainly wasn't more popular back in the day for a number of the decisions he made, but is the country in a better place today? And I think most people would say yes by a great number of metrics, and metrics that really matter. People would say yes. And so if you believed what he said then, and you take stock of where we are now, then he was right, that people are coming in today appreciative of that hard work, that they might not have supported it then, but he has been proven right. And so by that standard, I bet you if he was around today, he would be he would feel very satisfied that the work, the hard work, the political capital that he spent, the slings and arrows that came his way, it paid off because he wasn't doing it for himself. It paid off for the country that he wanted to leave to the next generation.
Do you think he got a sense of that already? Because, you know, the public opinion of your father changed rather quickly. And, you know, you and I know each other, but I will say, and you probably don't know this, I interviewed your dad a few times. And every time I interviewed your dad, he was so very kind. And I particularly remember this one event where he was walking around the other former Prime Minister, John Turner. Yeah. And Mr. Turner was struggling. And because of your father holding the chair, helping him walk, opening the door, he was giving Mr. Turner a level of dignity. And that really struck me. And people in that room appreciated what your father was doing. I'm wondering if your dad in his life was able to get the sense that the public judgment on him was perhaps not what he feared leaving office, and had more so. I
think he probably got glimpses of what we're witnessing right now. I think right now is probably the fullest expression of that thus far. And I think near the end of over the last, say, decade, he probably experienced, I mean, when I'd walk down the street with him, it's as if he was the mayor, he was the king of Kensington. And that was in whatever city we were in. People wanted to talk to him, take his picture, say thank you. This is on a much bigger scale right now. and because I think emotion is playing a big part in it, and nostalgia and sadness. But I think he knew that he was well on his way. He said, I'll always leave it to the historians. But I think in his own mind, in his own heart, I think he knew that the path that he had set Canada on would ultimately come back to him in the form of confirmation by those people that he had done the right things.
When the news was announced of your father's passing, when your sister turned to social media, I immediately thought of you because, again, we know each other. And I thought about how when you were younger, your father would call you Gentle Ben.
Nice Ben.
Nice
Ben, yeah. He called you Nice Ben. Still did, up until the very, very end.
And just how much he loved you.
Yeah.
He loved your siblings, your mom. What are you going to miss the most about your dad?
The older I got, the more time I spent with him, the more time I wanted to spend with him. As the stakes in my own personal life got higher, with kids and a mortgage and decisions that can affect more people, I turned to him more because of the importance of those decisions. I wanted to make sure I was making the right decisions. He invariably had very good advice for me. He was a very good listener. He would sit back, he would listen, and only after hearing everything he needed to hear would he give me the advice that would almost invariably pay off and be beneficial to me. So I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss how much he loved his grandkids. I'm going to miss how much he loved speaking to them on the phone. He loved when we would send him pictures of them. He'd love hearing their voices. We were planning on spending, today's his birthday, we were all supposed to be down in Florida for his birthday. We loved celebrating things as a family. I mean, as a family of 18 Irish Catholics, there's a lot of birthdays, there's a lot of celebration. So it's one less to celebrate, although we're going to make sure we honor him today. Anything that had to do with family, anything that had to do with joy, anything that had to do with smiling and telling jokes, and the quiet times that we spent together. There's so much. There's so much. I guess I'm not going to know what I miss until I'm in that moment that I don't have him.
I lost my mom last year, so I sympathize with what you're going through. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thanks, Michael.
My sympathies to you and to your family.
Thank you.
The official ceremonies honoring the late Prime Minister will continue tomorrow. The funeral cortege will arrive at St. Patrick's Basilica in Montreal at 10 a.m. Eastern. And there at St. Patrick's is where Mr. Mulroney will lie in repose. Visitations will take place both Thursday and Friday. And then on Saturday, the funeral cortege will make its way from St. Patrick's to Montreal's Notre Dame Basilica. This is where Mr. Mulroney's state funeral will take place, and CPAC will have full coverage throughout this week and will broadcast the state funeral on our channel and online at cpac.ca. Well, time now for a look at what happened in politics today. The federal government says an internal review of federal contracts uncovered nearly $5 million in fraud. 3 IT subcontractors allegedly gave false billing information for work with 36 separate government departments and crown corporations between 2018 and 2022. Ottawa has referred the cases to the RCMP, and Treasury Board President Anita Anand announced her department is strengthening protocols for federal public servants responsible for approving government contracts and will review its directive on conflicts of interest.
As the Auditor General has confirmed, there are rules in place to ensure sound procurement and management processes across government. But some of these rules were broken, and as I said, it's very concerning and unacceptable.
Federal cabinet ministers tried to present a united front before the cameras today as Liberal MP Anthony Housefather continues to consider his future within the party. This comes after a heavily amended and non-binding NDP motion passed in the House on Monday that called for the recognition of a Palestinian state. Housefather was one of 3 Liberal MPs who voted against the motion, saying it was anti-Israeli and left him wondering about his place in the party. Some senior members of the Trudeau cabinet say they hope Housefather chooses to stay.
Anthony's feelings on that are heartfelt, and it was a free vote, and Anthony expressed his views, and certainly I know we're all hoping that that he comes to the conclusion that his home is still in the Liberal Party.
Right.
And finally tonight, the Conservative leader is threatening the Trudeau Liberals with a carbon tax election. Pierre Poilievre has put on notice a motion of non-confidence in the government over its planned increase to the federal carbon tax next month.
In that carbon tax election, there will be a very simple choice. On the one hand, you will have the carbon tax coalition of the NDP and Justin Trudeau, who take your money, punish your work, tax your food, double your housing costs, and unleash crime and chaos in your community. Or common sense conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The vote on the motion will take place tomorrow and follows a failed vote today to kill the April 1st increase. And we will watch that vote in the House again tomorrow. But today we did have an opportunity to speak with the executive director of the Pembina Institute, which is a clean energy think tank. And we asked Chris Severson-Baker if he was worried about the potential of a carbon tax election.
It does concern me because, putting a price on pollution works. It's the most efficient policy that we have. And I think there's a lot of misinformation about how the policy isn't supposed to work, how the rebates work for Canadians and that sort of thing. And that really, if we were to not have that policy approach, we would have to resort to less efficient policy options like regulations, incentives and things like that. And that would be a shame. And I think it's really important, as we're having this conversation in Canada right now, to differentiate between the consumer-facing carbon price, which is what most of the conversation has been about, and the industrial carbon price, which is a lot more like what we have had in the past around putting a price on pollution for acid rain and other things clearly has worked. And so we don't want to lose that.
You don't want to lose that, but let's talk a little bit more about you call it misinformation, but just how effective has the carbon regime been, both economically and environmentally?
Well, it's from an the industrial consumer price is very effective. It's companies are basing long-term plans on an understanding that the price is going to go up over time, so that companies that can reduce pollution and generate credits would be able to sell them and be able to, that helps pay for the cost of doing the project. And then companies that have a higher cost of reducing emissions can buy those credits from others. And overall, we get the level of reduction that we're trying to achieve. And that is a very elegant, very flexible, market-based solution that we want to make sure that we keep. For consumers, I think there's been a real problem with communicating to consumers about the carbon price, the fact that that you get the money back, the fact that if you are able to put the money that you're getting back towards lowering your emissions of carbon, that you will be better off financially. And these messages just haven't been effectively delivered to Canadians, unfortunately.
Just part of our conversation with the head of the Pembina Institute. You can watch the full interview at cpac.ca or on our YouTube channel. The Coalition for a Better Future released its second annual scorecard this week. Co-chaired by former Liberal Cabinet Minister Anne McLellan and former Conservative Cabinet Minister Lisa Raitt, the coalition itself is concerned with Canada's economic prosperity. It uses the scorecard to measure whether Canada is on track to reach its full economic potential so that Canadians can continue to enjoy a high quality of life. But the news this year is not good, with a new Nanos poll commissioned by the coalition saying when it comes to ensuring a high standard of living, 1 in 2 Canadians believe this country is moving in the wrong direction. Well, to talk about this year's scorecard, we're now joined by Anne McLellan and Lisa Raitt. Hello to the both of you.
Hey, Michael.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice seeing you too. A big report here, very important information and conclusions. And I want to begin with one of the lines that you have in your summary, because you say that a year later since the last scorecard, because it's the second annual one, that your worries are only more heightened than they were a year ago. Why do you say that, Anne?
Well, I think because when you look at our 21 metrics, in those where progress has been made, it has been small, and we have too many metrics where, in fact, we're not making progress at all. So if you look at productivity per worker, that's going in the wrong direction. If you look at our GDP per capita, yes, small increase, but it's a small increase. And we're not seeing that growth in GDP that we're seeing in countries to which we would compare ourselves. We are seeing some progress in areas that are important to the economy. For example, export capacity of small and medium-sized businesses, which are the backbone of the Canadian economy. Yes, those numbers are increasing. They're exporting more to the United States and the rest of the world. That's good news. But again, those increases are small enough that we worry about the strength of the Canadian economy, which is why we talk in this year's report about fragile growth.
Fragile growth. And add to that, Lisa, you also say in this report that we are moving in the wrong direction when it comes to living standards. How are you measuring that? What leads you to that conclusion?
We've got a number of things. First of all, you take a look at median wages, which isn't too bad. I mean, it's a bit deceptive. Yes, we've seen a bump in the median wage. We are still far behind Australia, UK, and the United States. And we have a good goal to get there by 2030. So it's not something that you would look to and say, oh, this is terrible. But then you add in productivity. And you can see in productivity and GDP per capita, that's where it builds our resilience to deal with things that don't go our way. And those things are worse than they were pre-pandemic. And if Canada continues on the path it is, it's going to be a situation where our growth is absolutely anemic compared to what the rest of the world is going to be doing. So that's why living better is an important set of metrics, because it gives us an idea of what's going on in the economy when it comes to the purchasing power of people and how much money they have and what they're able to buy. Mm-hmm.
Which, actually goes to the real life experience of people. And to that, I do also want to talk about this Nanos poll that you commissioned, because it really captured, while you might be talking about subjects that some people will think are a little bit high above the head, people are feeling it on the ground based on this poll that you did, Anne.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And what's interesting about that poll is overall Canadians are feeling pessimistic about the direction of the economy, the country as it relates to the economy. But when you look at the demographics, what you are struck by is young people, age 18 to 35. Their pessimism is, what was it? It was 60-some%, Lisa.
Yeah, it's really striking. The question was, are you going in the wrong direction of making sure Canadians have a high standard of living? So that's living better. 18 to 34-year-olds, 63.6% of them said wrong direction. And then you get to my age group, 55 plus, only 47% said. So think about that. Look at that disconnect. I mean, the way Nick said it was very clearly, while we may be thinking that there potentially could be a crisis in a fragile economy, the 18 to 34-year-olds, they're in a crisis right now, and we've got to listen to them.
Yeah, I would say canary in the coal mine, but there's so many of them that it's more than just a canary,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So, when you talk about this, then, I'm wondering, who's dropping the ball here? Is it government? Is it through their policies? Is it business through a lack of investment? Who's dropping the ball when it comes to what you're tracking here, this dropping standard of living?
It's a combination of actors. It's governments at all levels. It's the private sector. And then maybe it's all the rest of us, civil society, where perhaps we need to be asking different questions, especially of those who would seek to lead us. And I think sometimes the phrase economic growth seems like this detached term that economists use. But what Lisa and I try to do is ask people to tell us how this is impacting you. How do you feel about your life right now? What are the things you need to have a high quality of life? Do you have them? Do you think you'll have them in the future? And I think that helps explain what economic growth is in a very real, concrete way for individual Canadians across the country. And we actually are going to be asking Canadians between now and the next election to tell us their stories about what economic growth means to them. Does it mean to them as an individual? What does it mean to them in their family or community or country? And we're hoping to hear from lots of Canadians around what economic growth means to them. Tell us your stories about your life and what economic growth means to you.
You know, Lisa, I am wondering about where the money has been spent when it comes to government policy at the very least, because we've seen this government invest billions into greener technologies. We've seen them, battery plants, if you will. They've also invested in building homes, national child care, which they make the argument creates more economic activity. Is it that these policies are not investing deep enough or not being concerted enough? Where's the disconnect there?
Well, that's the beauty of the scorecard. We're providing the analysis of where we are in terms of a metric, and it allows you then to judge, is that a really good policy that a government has put in place? Was that the right thing? I will tell you, though, the one commonality that goes through all of our discussions with all of our members has to do with it's hard to invest in Canada. It's hard to make a business investment in Canada because there's regulatory gridlock. And they said all the different levels of government need to coordinate better. And we heard this from the Dairy Farmers of Canada. We heard this from Carolyn Wilkins. We heard this from mostly all of our members, that an easy way, not too much money, of dealing with a lot of the questions around productivity and investment comes down to making it easier for you to do business in Canada.
I hate to say it, but we're quickly running out of time. But we are now approaching another federal budget. April 16 is when the finance minister will table it. Very quickly from each of you, in order to further the case that you're making here, what do you hope to see in that budget? And I'll begin with you.
I am going to say what you've just heard from Lisa. I think if you streamlined and made more efficient regulatory regimes, not only at the federal level, but the provinces and cities, what have we seen around housing? That in fact, it's a lot of the regulations that municipalities and urban centers have imposed that got in the way of at least generating new housing quickly. So I would say if you were able, first, the three levels of government to work together on regulatory efficiency and reform, but each level of government looking at their regulations and saying, what do we need to ensure the safety and health of our residents, but what don't we need and what could we do better? I would say that would make a big difference in terms of the growth agenda.
Yeah. Two things, and they're very granular. I'd like to see the investment tax credits for our clean technology be put into place. And it does go retroactive, but it has to be proclaimed, and we have to get them going in order to keep up on what's happening in the United States. But the second one is, and I'm really hoping it's in there, Michael, Indigenous loan guarantees. Access to capital for Indigenous nations so that they can actually have participation in a meaningful way in leadership in their resource projects.
Well, it is a worthwhile report to go through. Thank you for speaking to us. And of course, people, you can read it at home. But for now, Anne McLellan and Lisa Raitt, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is our program for this Wednesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow night, but up next, Esther Bégin avec l'essentiel.